I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as a ... which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as a ... And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. There are most definitely a few sectors with regards to future career opportunities that I'd be looking into if I could rewind the clock. Today's career spotlight on cybersecurity squarely fits into this thought. And as our world races towards further digitization, this field is only going to expand in scope, demand, and significance. And as of right now, it's an industry where opportunities are to be had. In fact, according to a recent Forbes article, becoming a cyber consultant is the second highest paying job one can potentially land without a degree. How about that? Anyways, this episode is all about exploring the world of cybersecurity as far as roles, responsibilities, and opportunities. And spoiler alert, according to our guest today, a top cyber expert and consultant and educator, you don't have to be a hacker or even technically skilled to find your groove in cybersecurity. There are plenty of options for people from various backgrounds. Anyways, I reckon it's about time to launch into things, so give me a second to introduce our esteemed guest to you, and we can get this show on the road. May Brooks-Kempler is a cybersecurity expert whose career began in the 1990s exploring the realms of game, cheats, and hacks on internet instant messaging chats. This early fascination led her through a distinguished journey in cybersecurity, from penetration testing to security architect, and eventually Chief Information Security Officer. Now today, she's a highly sought-after strategic consultant, speaker, and mentor known for her dynamic involvement in developing and promoting innovative cybersecurity initiatives and guiding startups. May's expertise and engaging delivery have made her a favorite at numerous speaking engagements, including a TEDx talk, keynotes, and commentator on critical cybersecurity issues. Her role as a podcaster further amplifies her reach, where she shares vital security insights with a global audience. As a member of the International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium Board of Directors, an authorized certified information system security professional, and healthcare information security and privacy practitioner instructor, and co-author, May's dedication to advancing the cybersecurity profession is unmistakable. Her book, Scams, Hacking, and Cybersecurity, The Ultimate Guide to Online Safety and Privacy, and her online courses reflect her commitment to making the digital world a safer place for all, especially families, as underscored by her personal mission as a mother of three. And through her extensive experience and influential voice in the field, May Brooks-Kempler continues to shape the future of online safety, making her a pivotal figure in the world of cybersecurity education and advocacy. So with all of that noted, I'd love to welcome you to my conversation with May Brooks-Kempler. Yeah, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, May?
All good. How are you?
Yeah, excellent. Really good. I'm excited to have you on the program here. And to be frank and to be truthful, I've had a few cybersecurity experts on the program. But, I think it speaks to this point of how critically important this field is and where it's going. I think the opportunities are going to be there. So yeah, like I said, I'm excited to explore further conversations on this topic with you today.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I do have this first segment lined up, and it's something called Coloring Wikipedia. As my listeners know, it's a segment I just read off a definition of something related to what the guest is all about. Now, surprise, surprise, I went with the fairly general one here, cybersecurity. Let me just read that off, and then maybe you can share some thoughts. Sound okay?
Sure. Right. Absolutely.
Okay. So here we go. Cybersecurity. Computer security, also cybersecurity, Digital security, or information technology, IT security, is the protection of computer software, systems, and networks from threats that can lead to unauthorized information disclosure, theft, or damage to hardware, software, or data, as well as from the disruption or misdirection of the services they provide. There you go. It's about as nuts and bolts as you could probably get for a definition. But first, take, what do you think of that?
Well, it's actually pretty accurate. I would add that it's protecting the data. Let's say from three main points: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Personally, I always say I'm an information security professional and not a cybersecurity professional, because for people, they don't care if the data was stored in a computer or paper binders. If the data is gone, the data is gone. So my consideration is always about, for example, for confidentiality, even if it's on a piece of paper, it still has to remain confidential. But that's a pretty accurate description.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, that's good to hear then. Wikipedia's on it. Sometimes these definitions don't
Yeah,
hit.
I think so.
Yeah.
No, I think it's pretty accurate. I would differentiate that cybersecurity can have very boring data as well. For example, if we're looking at something like traffic lights, it's definitely cyber. It's definitely prone to attack. It's definitely something we have to protect. But the actual data is very boring. No one is going to pay money to know if this traffic light changes every 30 seconds or 40 seconds. That's not interesting data. So that is sort of the different differentiator between information security and cybersecurity, because cyber is only on technological devices, only things that are interconnected.
Well, I did mention off the top, a little bit about your background to introduce you to listeners, but maybe this might be a nice time to hear a little bit more about it from you personally.
Well, I think that cybersecurity sort of found me, not I found it. So apparently I realized that something like 10 years into the industry, that what I used to do as a teenager, trying to get ahead in computer games like Commander Keen, that was my favorite, and finding those cheats and codes and things like that. Apparently that's called hacking. I didn't even realize that until some like 8, 10 years later. So I was always very into technology. When I was 16 years old, to get out of ICT classes that happened on Friday mornings, and I really wanted to get those 2 hours free, my teacher at the time challenged me and told me, okay, if you can build a website within 24 hours, you get the entire semester free.
Wow.
Never challenge a 16-year-old to get more sleep. You will lose. I stayed up all night, and by the next morning, I had a working website. And actually, there was no real internet at the time. I actually went to the computer store and bought this great big manual of HTML coding. So that's sort of how I got started.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And yeah, and later on, I just tripped into one of my friends at the time told me we're starting this new team doing information security. You want in? Like, sure, but what's that?
Yeah. At what point was that? Like, how old were you there when that opportunity came along?
I was, I think, 21, something like that. Over 20 years ago, I was serving in the IDF at the time. I was about to finish my second term already, or my third. I think it was my third. And that opportunity came along. I was convinced I was going to be a doctor.
Yeah. Wow.
Just said, oh, I'm going to do it for a couple of years. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So you went from gaming into this challenge by your high school teacher, and then just a social network of friends that kind of pushed you or pulled you into it further, sounds like.
Basically, I was working in adjacent fields like networking and what today we call cyber threat intelligence. We didn't call it that at the time. So I was doing adjacent things, but the industry as a whole wasn't as mature as it is today. There were no clear pathways into cybersecurity. Even when I was already in the field, if you look at my career, it went all over the place, from penetration testing to sales to security practitioner and architect to being a CISO. So it was really all over the place. And social engineering, we used to be sort of all in one professionals. And today I see, also as a security educator, I see more and more clear pathways. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't transition. If you started as a SOC analyst, it doesn't mean that this is what you're going to do for the rest of your career. But if you chose correctly in early stages of your career, you will probably go down a certain route, at least to a certain point, and maybe then pivot to something else within this industry.
I guess that speaks to the point of just how tech is evolving, right? I mean, like this high degree of specialization is required within your field now to be able to like combat or to be able to like set things up to, protect assets, whether it's data or whatever else it might be. Is that kind of an accurate assumption that I'm making there?
It is. Also, I think it has to do with what information security or cybersecurity is, how it is perceived by the rest of the world, the business world. We as security professionals, we have our own perception on why it's important. But I'm also a business leader. I sit on board of directors. I have my MBA. I'm working actually right now on my doctorate in business administration. And I was a business owner. I am a business owner. So when I take off my cybersecurity hat and put on my business leader hat, things look very different. And that is so the maturity that I see this industry going towards. And that is actually part of my doctorate, researching how cybersecurity can actually have a positive impact on the business bottom line. Because we started this industry out of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's sort of how we built this industry. No one really understood what we're doing. Everyone understands that it's dangerous and it's important. But why is it important? Because the regulators tell us? Well, that's part of the equation, but is that the entire story? Probably not. So that's something that is not just me. A lot of people in this industry are currently researching to see where we're going.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine as well, again, getting to that point of, the maturity of this space and how tech has evolved. I think now too, it's like penetrated just like the average consumer or the average individual's life now that they themselves might have had some interactions where data has been stolen from them or they've been hacked personally or they have experiences. So I think like the understanding of the significance or importance is probably there just through just life and living within the day and age that we're part of as well. I would guess again from an outsider's perspective here.
Oh, completely, completely. I think that I still see, unfortunately, a lot of people, especially parents and sometimes even technological leaders in various cases, even cybersecurity sometimes, saying, oh, we avoid using the internet or we don't allow our kids to have smartphones. In my eyes, that's completely wrong, honestly. The reason is we can't avoid technology. Technology is here to stay. It's like a lot of people say, no, 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 AI is terrible, it's going to take all our jobs. Well, maybe, but we have to accept it because it's not going away. It's like someone, if we'll go 100 years back, people who refuse to drive cars and say, no, 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 I have my horse and buggy and everything's fine. Well, yeah, it's fine, but you're going to stay behind. We have to move ahead with technology. And I think that today, understanding cybersecurity and online safety, it's basic. It's like basic life skills, just like road safety. We need to teach our kids how to look right and left, and we need to teach our kids how to stay safe online.
There it is.
And it's not hard. And honestly, it's not hard as long as I'm not an engineer. I don't know why when I press the gas, the car goes faster, and why when I press the brake, it stops. I just know that this is what's going to happen. That's it. I know the signs. I know how to look around me and sort of identify those crazy drivers that are cutting between lanes and avoid them. Those are skills that I learned. I wasn't born with those skills. I learned them. It's very similar in the online world. You just have to know, you just have to have someone who will tell you, look at this. This is dangerous. This is a warning sign. Again, just like someone crossing lanes without blinking.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And I think this is reaching a point where people are understanding the significance of it. But as far as like going about the educating and what to do and what not to do, I think we're still kind of struggling there. So that's where, people like yourself certainly come in and are filling those gaps, I think. But I've got this other question here. And this is something that, in our correspondence before, leading up to this talk, something that you want to speak about, which is like the misconceptions about getting into the cybersecurity space. And like even just before this recording, I, randomly saw something online. It was an article put out by Forbes where it was like the 10 most appealing jobs that you can get into without a degree. And number 2 was a cybersecurity analyst. There you go. Speak to us about this. I'd love to hear more.
Obviously, I'm all for education as a cyber educator and someone who's working on her doctorate, but cybersecurity is a very diverse field. And I think that is probably the biggest misconception. people think, oh, I'm not a programmer, I can't be in cybersecurity. Oh, I'm not tech enough, I can't be in cybersecurity. I'm not a hacker, I can't. You can be in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a huge, huge field. We need people. I think that the biggest misconception is what a cybersecurity professional looks like and what a hacker looks like. Hackers come in all shapes, sizes, backgrounds. Honestly, they come from so many different backgrounds and they are such diverse thinkers, which enables them to attack people. And people don't understand cybersecurity or information security is not a technological problem. It's a human problem. Between 85 and 95% of all security incidents involve the human factor. So we need people from different backgrounds with diverse points of views to protect organizations. We need people who are more analytical. We need people who are problem solvers. We need marketers. For example, talking about cybersecurity within the organization, for a lot of cybersecurity professionals, it's something that does not come naturally. For us, it's much easier to run to the tech and talk about, oh, look at this crazy vulnerability. It exploits this and this and this in the code. Well, the board of directors really don't care. They don't care which vulnerability is exploited. They only care about the business context. But a lot of technological professionals find it very hard to look at that perspective. So we need in cybersecurity, we need people from so many different backgrounds. I always say there's something in cybersecurity for almost everyone. You just have to find your specific niche.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I really like that. And that's getting back to the point I made earlier of, having several different guests on this program with backgrounds in cybersecurity. One in particular, Chris Hadnaghi, who strongly recommended that we get in touch and we speak. He himself had a really great episode on his company, Social Engineering, as well as another individual from their company, actually a couple, but one in particular, a behavioral psychologist who speaks to this point that you're raising, right? Like coming from a very specialized background, but is operating within this field of cybersecurity and social engineering and trying to help protect other organizations and individuals from, individuals that are out there to do some harm. So yeah, I think that's a really, really valid point there. And it just opens up, I guess, that the world of possibility for people who are considering this line of work.
Exactly. And not to be too afraid if you go, you take a course. And sometimes I see that, as unfortunately, with students and with people I mentor, that they took a course or they started work and it's not exactly what they wanted. Now, my career, as I said earlier, took so many twists and turns. I had to go through various, very different roles to realize what I love about cybersecurity and what I hate. For example, a lot of people aspire to be penetration testers. That's actually what I did on my first role. That was my first role in cybersecurity. I was a pen tester. Unfortunately, I hated it. It's completely wrong for my personality.
Okay, for people who don't know what that is, maybe you could just give a really quick overview of what that would be.
Oh, absolutely. So penetration tester is basically an ethical hacker. I was paid by companies to hack them. So that was the idea. So I had to do the research just like any other malicious hacker, but I did it. I use my powers for good, usually. No, I use this for good. I still do. I try to. So basically, it's researching the company, finding where their vulnerabilities lie. It could be, by the way, to Chris Hadnaghi's point, it could, in many cases, combine social engineering as well. It's much easier for me to get your password just by talking to you and getting you to give me your password than hacking your password. So in many cases, that will be the first stage. For me, the research part, what we call today threat intelligence or cyber reconnaissance, there are a lot of terms for it. I love that. The actual technical side of trying to technically hack the company, I found that so boring. I really hated it. And at some point I said, well, maybe cybersecurity is not for me. No, that part of cybersecurity is not for me. It's wrong for my personality. There's no way I will enjoy that because it's something that is it's very specific. It's repetitive. It's going to the bits and bytes. And that's not me because I like looking at the bigger picture. And again, that's a personality trait.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with my technical abilities. Can I program? Yes. Do I like programming? No, I hate it in every fiber of my being. My husband is an engineer. He loves it with every fiber of his being. That's fine. Maybe that's why we work well together.
I think it speaks to that point of refinement. As far as careers go, like you get into a field, and most industries are fairly well developed. There's several different avenues that you could be going down. And sometimes the only way to find out what you like and what you don't like is just by, dipping your toes into a few different ones, spending a year here, spending a couple of years doing this. That's where it gets refined. And I think that's a misconception for a lot of people, again, when we're considering careers, that you have to have it all figured out when you enter into this field, when you enter into this industry. You can't make any mistakes along that way. Well, the truth of it is most professionals like yourself are trying a few things out, and then they find what they want, what they like, and that's where things usually start to take off.
Well, even in very specialized fields, I have a very good friend. She's a doctor. She started a residency as an orthopedic surgeon. After about 2 or maybe even 3 years of residency, she realized she doesn't want to be an orthopedic surgeon. And she pivoted. And today she's a plastic surgeon. She's still a surgeon. That's still what she loves, but switched to a specialty. And my husband is the same. Yeah, my husband is an engineer. He's an electrical engineer for about, I think, a good 15 years, maybe even longer. He was working as head of R&D development for hardware. And then he changed his career trajectory to something else adjacent. It's still the same. He's still an engineer. He still uses his background as a developer. But today he's doing integration, system integration. So it's the bigger picture. And I think that a lot of people have that misconception, especially young people, when I talk to them. Oh, I'm not sure I want to do that for the rest of my life. Well, who said you had to do that for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
My dad was a travel agent. 20 years down the line, he switched to insurance. 20 years later, it switched again. So you can do a lot of things during your life.
Yeah. You set up your own rules, really, at the end of the day, for these things. And sometimes they can be empowering, and sometimes they can be almost debilitating.
Yeah, and I think that you grow from every experience. So if you take your previous roles and your previous experience to your new roles, sometimes people tell me, I want to pivot into cybersecurity. What did you do? Oh, it's not relevant. Of course it's relevant. If you were a teacher, maybe you'll be a wonderful cyber educator. If you were a marketer, maybe you'll go into cyber marketing. Maybe you won't. Maybe you do something completely new. But don't eliminate everything you've done before you've achieved things, you've gained experience.
I mean, this is a field that is, it's growing, right? It's an industry that is on the up and up, and opportunities certainly abound. There's a lot out there.
There is a lot out there, but people have that, again, misconceptions. People think, oh, I'll just take a cybersecurity course or degree or whatever, and people will start throwing money at me. No, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. And yes, there are people in cybersecurity, even experienced people in cybersecurity, who are actively looking for jobs and not finding them and unemployed. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist in cybersecurity. I'm saying in cybersecurity, especially if you are passionate about this industry and you invest time in building your career and your network and you engage with other people and you keep growing, you'll probably have those right opportunities.
There you go. Well, maybe we can step into another segment here at Q&A Discovery. We can continue this back and forth. Now, getting back to you and your work as an expert, as a consultant, as a speaker, as someone who's right on the edge of everything that's going on within your industry, how do you keep up with all of that? I mean, that's a big question for me. I would assume that must be a challenge. Again, people are coming to you for these answers. They're throwing questions at you all the time, I'm sure. So keeping pace with it must be a bit of a chore.
It is. I think that it's probably true for any field. If you do something out of passion, it doesn't feel like a chore. So for me, cybersecurity it's my work, obviously, but I'm very fortunate. I always say in coaching, they always ask you, would you do this even if no one paid you? And I always say, please don't stop paying me. But yes, for 99% of what I do, the answer is absolutely yes. So I'm very fortunate, but it is definitely something that is part of my commitment. So if you look at my daily calendar, my weekly calendar, I have time slots for getting up to speed. I'm on various professional groups, online groups. I read all the time. I listen to podcasts all the time. I produce my own podcasts all the time. So I'm trying to stay ahead. The one thing I had to come to terms with, and it took me a very long time to come to terms with, is I'll never know everything I want to know. I'll never get into those bits and bytes in everything because that's impossible. There are only 24 hours in a day. Although I'm hyperactive and I'm very good at looking at a lot of things at the same time, still, there's still only 24 hours a day. And that's also accepting that and understanding, okay, this is what I'm interested in. This is not. Should I actually go down the rabbit hole here? Is that useful for me? I used to go, and being an ethical hacker in my past, I used to go and play around and find those vulnerabilities and research them. And it took me a very long time to let that part of my life go. Today, I wouldn't trust me to hack my own Wi-Fi, and I don't know the password because I set it up. I'm not sure I can break it without knowing the password, and nor should I. It's not my role anymore. So it's sort of differentiating between, for me, the bigger picture and the small details. And for other people who are in those technical roles, look at the bigger picture, sure, but dive in where you need to dive in.
I like that. It's a conscious choice, right? And kind of niching down on areas that, one, you have interest in, and then two, that are going to serve you well in your career and what you'd like to be doing maybe down the line in the short term and the long term. And also, I like that point of, like not being overwhelmed by it all and understanding the facts of like, yes, I only have 24 hours a day. I can only cover so much. Like if I try to go after everything, I'm going to go crazy. Like I can't do it all, nor should I. So I
But I
won't.
can tell a lie. But I can tell a lie, create summaries for me. And I do that all the time, by the way. I have those automations and go screen that, send me a summary of what I need to know. And I told him what I want to know. Is it 100% accurate? No, of course not. And is it to the degree that I would like to know everything? No, there are things that I want to know better. And then I do go down that rabbit hole, but at least it saves me up a lot of time and a lot of energy. So that's the way you can use technology to your advantage here as well.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I got this other question as well, and it's returning to you and your past, and then also right up to what you're doing right now. When you entered all of this and got into this space, I'm guessing that you as a woman were probably a big minority, and probably even right now to a certain degree. Now, I'd like to dive into that a little bit more to find out what that experience was like then as opposed to what it is now. And then maybe any advice that you'd have for women who are interested in the field but might feel a little bit intimidated by it all.
Wow, that's a big one.
It is a big one,
An
yeah.
entire episode on that. Yeah. I was always the only woman in the room. I'm sort of used to it. Maybe because from a young age, I was always sort of leaning towards technology. So I was always in a minority situation, and I'm sort of used to it. It doesn't mean that it's always easy. There were a lot of incidents throughout the years of misogyny and chauvinism, and it still happens. I remember one day I was standing, waiting to go on stage as a speaker, and someone comes up to me and, we're out of bagels. Why are you telling me that? Oh, you're not from the production team? No, I'm standing backstage because I'm actually the next speaker. But thank you for telling me that there are no more bagels. I'm sorry for that. I promise I didn't eat all of them. So it's having thick skin on the one hand side, also being aware that sometimes people say things without thinking. I know that there's a lot of conversation today about what is appropriate to say and what's not appropriate to say. And I know that some people are, honestly, they're afraid to say good morning because how it might be interpreted. I prefer to live my life assuming that the other side, not in my professional life, but like not when I'm talking about my adversary, but talking about my colleagues and friends and people who I know personally, I prefer to believe in the best of people. And if someone tells me, oh, nice blouse, to just say thank you and not assume that he's sexually harassing me. Now, that is maybe my defense or coping mechanism that I developed throughout the years. I try to have a very thick skin. However, I don't shut up when things go too far, and they did many times, and I had to put people in their place. And I think that one of the pivotal moments for me, and that's why I'm a big advocate for security education and specifically for the CISSP certification, is I didn't hear about imposter syndrome until I was in my late 30s. I didn't know what it was. Now, for listeners who don't know what it is, it's that assumption that any second now, any second, everyone will know I'm a fraud, that I don't know anything, that I have no idea what I'm talking about, and assuming that everyone else knows so much more than I do. Now, men also suffer from imposter syndrome, but women have it in ridiculous amounts. Sometimes I find myself, and I actually found myself a few months ago. I've been a public speaker for 10 years. I've done a TEDx talk. I do keynotes. I want to believe that I know what I'm doing when I'm on stage. And I had to create this presentation for a talk. And my mind went blank. And every idea I had, I said, it is a terrible idea. It's super boring. No one wants to hear that. And after a couple of hours of this, it wasn't a couple of minutes, it was a few hours, like, oh man, this is imposter syndrome. I called a friend of mine. I told her, this is what's going on. I understand. Logically, I understand that I'm full of it. And these are great ideas. I need to hear it from someone else. These are the ideas. She tweaked me for like a few minutes. We ping-ponged it. And that was it. So sometimes even reaching out and realizing you're not alone. And I actually saw a post today from a very well-known author that I love dearly. His name is Yuval Abramovich. He published already 19 books, and today submitted his manuscript for his 20th book. And he actually shared on social media that he's now very nervous because he knows that he has a couple of weeks until the editor gets back to him. And even though it's his 20th book, he's still not sure if he has a hit on his hands or a total flop. And I love that post so much because it shows that even someone who's a multiple time best-selling author is still nervous when they submit a new manuscript. So it happens to everyone. So I think that being a woman in cybersecurity, even knowing that this syndrome exists, giving it a name, knowing that it happens to everyone, and talking about it openly. You're here because you deserve to be. And again, for me, the CISSP was a pivotal moment because it was external validation, someone telling me, you know your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm a big advocate for getting that certification, getting that stamp of approval. For me, it made it a big difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, all of that stuff adds up. And, it goes without saying that we as humans have these moments of weakness, within our lives, within our professional careers. And these things, they hit us, and it sounds like that was the case for you. But I like that point of just sort of like acknowledging that that's normal. It does occur from time to time, and seeking out maybe assistance if it's needed or required, or even just talking about it at times just to get it off your chest and, hear a different perspective on it all and understand that, yes, okay, it does happen to each and every person at some point or multiple points in their career, and that's perfectly acceptable. And just if you can acknowledge that, I think that's empowerment in a sort of reverse twisted way, right?
Completely. I couldn't agree more. Sharing our weakness is actually very powerful.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid, for example, people standing in front of a classroom and someone asks them the question, how many instructors do you know, professors do you know that they know what? I have no idea. Let's check it together, or I'll check and get back to you. So many teachers just BS their way around. And I hate that. I don't mind telling my students, you know what? I have no idea. Let's check.
Yeah. Or you tell me.
And that's something I actually learned. Yeah, that's something I actually learned from a professor I had, I think it was in my BA. And he said that, and I found it so incredibly powerful. They said, you know what? I don't know. And he was the expert in that field.
There you go.
And I was like, wow, it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm not the expert of everything. It's fine.
Yeah, I love that. I think, again, the word that comes to mind is empowerment. And just hearing that, I think that is empowerment right there, is understanding that fact. You don't have to know everything all the time. You don't have to be switched on and expect it to be perfect within your field, even if you are one of the leading experts, right? Like, no one's perfect. So yeah, no, I really like that.
And no one else knows everything either.
Yeah. Really quickly, in terms of any advice that you would give to young woman or any woman who's interested in getting into cybersecurity?
Build your community. And it could be women in cyber or women in tech. It could be men in tech. Some of my best friends who are the biggest voices for diversity in cybersecurity are men, because they understand, they appreciate the importance of diversity of thought. So it doesn't have to be women, but build your tribe, have your network, have those people that you can call and consult. Don't think that because you're a woman, you don't deserve to be in the room. You deserve to be in the room. And no one else knows everything either. It's fine. I think for a lot of women, we think, oh, I wasn't a gamer or I wasn't a hacker. Oh, we have those assumptions. We tend to put ourselves down. Women really tend to put themselves down. And that's research. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't explain why it happens, but I know that it does happen. So when men see a job ad, if they tick like a certain amount of the boxes, they'll apply, even if it's a small amount. For a woman, they have to tick all or almost all the boxes. Some things are nice to have. That's something I also say to employers. Don't put something on the job description that you don't really need. I mean, if you actually need someone who can configure a firewall, audit ISO 27001, and make great brownies, then put that on the job description. But if they don't really need to make great brownies, it doesn't have to be there.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. I've got this other question here, and I think this is something that's coming across in this talk already. It's like, clearly you're passionate about the work you're doing. You've already spoken at this point, and it comes across loud and clear. And as well, I mean, I've read it off the top, like you're involved in several different things. You're consulting organizations, professionals, startups. You're speaking to the general public on tips and strategies. You have speaking engagements. You already mentioned this TEDx talk that you've given, an online course, and you even have a book, as well as a podcast. I think I've got most of them there, and I'm probably missing about 5 or 6 other things that you're involved in.
Yes, probably.
I say all of this to bring at this point that, again, there's passion behind everything that you're doing. And clearly this mission, like you must be driven by this mission. And here's the question is like, to what degree does having this strong sense of like urgency or strong sense of like mission attached to everything you're doing, to what degree has that propelled you in your career, would you say?
That's a great question. So it took me a very long time to find my passion in cybersecurity. I knew I liked it. I enjoyed it. But as I mentioned, I always thought I will be a doctor. Actually, my BA is in biology because the plan was I'll do my BA during my service and then I'll go to med school. It was a very clear plan. And med school, I think I would want to assume that most doctors come from passion and from a very strong motivator. And for many years, I think till I was in my mid-30s, I used to check every few months or so, can I still go to med school? Are my grades still good enough? At some point I said, you love what you do. Find your impact there. You're not going to suddenly at 35 go to med school. I mean, maybe I still will, who knows? But no, I don't think I will. So I had to find my mission in cybersecurity because I loved it, but it wasn't clear to me what my mission was. Today, it's very clear to me. For me, it's going to sound very high level, but it's making the digital world a safer place. I have 3 kids who are all about technology. I'm all about technology. I don't want the computers to kill me at the end. So I need to find ways to not fight back, but educate back. That's why I do a lot of cyber education. That's why I volunteer with the ICT board of directors. It's a lot of work, but I see where this industry is going. And I know that we need more professionals. We need people who are passionate about this industry. Things like doing the security awareness and education and the TEDx and even the book. I didn't write this book to be a moneymaker. I don't know how many of our listeners have ever published a book or look, unless someone is, I don't know, Brandon Sanderson or J.K. Rowling, they're not making money out of books. That's, for me at least, that was never the idea. The idea was a lot of people asked me for advice on how to stay safe online. So I started doing talks in my community, and then I started writing about it on social media. And I have fairly large Facebook community with 27,000 members now that are getting advice online. And then I said, well, if people want to hear from me, people need to hear this. So I did the TEDx talk. And then at some point I said, you know what? A book is a great way to deliver this content. Anyone can have it in the tip of their hands. Just open the book and read. And it's not the only resource. It's just one more resource. But for me, it was a way of giving back. So that is sort of the driver, finding that way of giving back. It doesn't have to be altruistic. Anyone can have their own passion, especially in cybersecurity. Some people are just passionate about technology and they want to make technology better. Great. Do that. But find your passion within this industry.
Yeah.
Or any industry.
Yeah, I really like that. The reason I ask that question is I think it's such a big driver of individuals' success ultimately with whatever they sink themselves into. And like, if you can attach yourself to a mission, you can have that statement that you just spoke of, a second ago. If you have that and it just like it rolls off the tip of your tongue, that can really spell all the difference, as opposed to somebody who's just like kind of going through the motions within their career, kind of into it, kind of not into it. Like, things are never going to be smooth. They're never going to be perfect. But if you keep searching, you keep digging, and eventually you settle in on something that really drives you, that really motivates you, suddenly there you go. You're writing a book, probably something that you never envisioned that you would do necessarily, or starting a podcast, or getting on this committee, doing this, doing a TED Talk. And all of these things sort of like build. They almost become that proverbial snowball that like you start it like it's small at the top of the hill and it just gets bigger and bigger as it goes down the hill. And whether you're aiming for your career to like, expand and present all these wild options to you and all these great opportunities, these things just naturally will come once you do kind of attach yourself to something like that, or at least it increases the odds of this occurring. So yeah, I think it's a critical piece of advice for anyone, not only within cybersecurity, but any profession in particular, is if you keep digging and keep looking for that one thing that really drives you, it can suddenly grow from there. And I think you would probably agree with that.
Completely agree with that. I think that it's very hard if you look at someone who's doing something. And again, I don't think it's unique to cybersecurity. When I was starting out, if I would look at the CISO of, I don't know, Walmart and try to see what they're doing, that was too far down the line. I couldn't envision myself going from here to there. But if I looked within my own community and I looked at, okay, this is where I want to be in 5 years, not in 15 years, in 5 years. And that's what I always try to do personally, and talk to my students about it and people I work with. Look 5 years down the line. You can talk about 20 years down the line, but that might change a million times. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, would I be living in the UAE? I would have said, no.
Right.
Like, what will I do in the UAE?
Yeah.
So you can't anticipate everything that happens during your life and your career and everything. But if you're intentional about sort of what you want to achieve, not necessarily how, but at least what sort of lifestyle do you want? What sort of career do you want? Do you want to travel a lot, or do you want to be in one place? Do you want to have a corporate career for a very long time, or do you want to do your own thing? These are questions that are relevant, I think, in every field. And a lot of people don't stop to ask themselves that. And I always talk about my favorite quote from Alice in Wonderland. Alice goes to the Cheshire Cat and asks him, "Excuse me, where should I go from here?" And the cat also, "Where do you want to go?" "I don't really mind where I'm going." "Then it doesn't really matter which way you turn." So if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there.
Yeah, well said. But I do have this other segment here. I would like to step into a water cooler story segment. And this is a segment where I just, ask guests to indulge listeners with the story related to their work. And really curious to hear what you have for us today, May.
I'm going to share something. I don't think I ever shared it online.
All right.
So I think it's the first time. So you're not going to believe me because we're doing this podcast and I just mentioned my TEDx and keynotes and everything. But up until 10 years and 3 months ago, 10 years and 2 months ago, if there was one thing that I was completely convinced that I will never, ever do under any circumstances, is public speaking. Never. I was a complete introvert. I said, I will never, ever do public speaking. That was like my number one fear. And by the way, that is the number one fear of most people.
I was just going to say that. It's not a big
time.
surprise.
Yeah.
Like, this is always a top 5 for most people, and not even top 2, 3, number 1 on a lot of lists.
Well, but it's funny because people that see me today and see me do public speaking and see me doing the podcast think, "Oh, you're a natural public speaker." No, I'm not. I had to work really hard on that. So here I want to give a big shout out to a man called Avi Weissman. And Avi is the CEO of a cybersecurity college in Israel. And he knew me at the time for something like 10 years. I did my penetration testing course with them and everything. And 10 years down the line, I told him I'm going to go and do CISO course. 290 hours of training. That's what I wanted. He said, "No, you're doing the CISSP." Now, the CISSP is the gold standard. It's considered one of the highest ranking certifications in cybersecurity. And I said, no, that's too hard. No, imposter syndrome, forget it. He pushed me. I took the course and I told him, when I fail, and I will fail. You're going to let me do CISO free of charge. I said, fine. If you fail, you'll do CISO free of charge. But if you pass, you start teaching. I was like, sure.
Okay.
If I pass, I will also have wings. So I don't have wings, but I did pass the exam. And very, very soon after, they called me, said, okay, so your first course starts on this date. I'm like, what? No, what? No, what?
Yeah.
So that was, I think that was about 5 minutes of,
Right.
but
Stumbling. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
promised,
Yeah.
I did promise. And I started teaching, and it wasn't easy, but it changed my life completely. So stepping outside my comfort zone, and that is not stepping, that is jumping very far outside my comfort zone, really changed my life. I think for me, the CISSP, that again, that external stamp of approval made me feel that it is something that I can do. But for many years, I work, and I still do. I take every single year, I take course on public speaking. Now, people tell me, but you deliver, you do trainings on public speaking. Yes, I do, but there's always the next level. So never stop learning. There's always the next level. Lifelong learning is my biggest passion. I think it's quite obvious. And yeah, so a big thank you to Avi, who challenged me and didn't let me get out of it.
Yeah, didn't let you to complacent
Yeah.
in any way. Yeah, I like that. I like that story. It's
Mhm.
inspiring. And I like to this point we've spoken about like chasing after your passion, things that you are into, things that you know you like. But I think there's this other part of this whole equation when we're considering careers and life in general is like things that you maybe aren't as good at. Stepping through doors that are a little bit uncertain, and taking some smart, calculated risks, maybe with some encouragement from people that you trust who are, encouraging you to do so. And then obviously like trying to skill up along the way too, and addressing some of these issues. And you don't know what's going to happen, like it's obviously right now, like the way you've reflected on it, that this been a big part of the success in your career. You've really changed as an individual and as a professional by taking on that responsibility early on in your career. So yeah, I love that. It's a great story.
It made me realize that I can achieve things that I didn't think were possible. And it helped me also find my mission. So, and it all started with stepping outside my comfort zone, because I could have continued doing those roles. At the time I was a consultant, I was very happy doing consulting roles. I was very happy with that. I could have continued. I could have done it to this day. Maybe I would have still been a CISO, and I would probably be pretty happy, but I wouldn't be as passionate as I am now. So it's not something that I started out with this passion. It took time.
Well, we are rounding the bend in this very last segment, a crystal ball segment. As the name implies, we're looking at the future, trends, predictions, so on and so forth. And again, like returning this point of AI, the world that we're living in right now, it's the talk of the town, of course, for lots of good reasons. And as an outsider, I'm guessing that like within your space in particular, like AI certainly must be this wild variable where it must be allowing people into your space, maybe bad actors that wouldn't normally infiltrate as easily because they can rely on something like AI to give them the skills and tools and knowledge that they didn't have before. But also on the flip side, like the tools at the disposal of professionals like yourself or people within your industry, they must be also leveraging AI to be able to combat some of the ill intentions of these bad actors. So it's this really fascinating game of cat and mouse that I would assume is taking place right now. And this all leads me to this question of like, how is your industry taking shape now that AI is infiltrating it all?
Well, the industry is very diverse in their approach to how they use or don't use AI. I actually know a company, a technological company, that completely restricts the use of AI in their organization. It's not a defense contractor or something like that. It's a tech company, regular tech company. For me, going back to what I said about technology and kids, I don't think that's the right approach. You're staying behind. Other companies are just allowing everything in. Some companies do have those guardrails in place, and they try to build their own mechanisms. So I think that introducing AI into organizations and into professional, not just from a cybersecurity but professional perspective, I think in general, we're all learning what it is it can do, how much can we trust it, where are the pain points that it's not going to solve. But some things that it's going to do is going to automate a lot of things that today are very cumbersome and very boring. I think that for a lot of security professionals that are just entering the field and are doing those mundane day-to-day security operations, SOC analysis roles, I think that the tier one is, I wouldn't say it's going to be completely replaced by AI, but mostly the bigger question is, how do you learn to run before you learn to walk? So
Right.
we'll need tier two and tier three, but they'll never do tier one. So we'll have to, as an educator, it's something that I'm always thinking about. How can I give them the equivalent of a 2 years tier one experience? For example, I just took that one role. How do I give them that experience that they need to have that maturity to deal with more advanced things? But I think that AI, I personally am a big fan of AI. I think it helps us in so many different ways. It helps us create things, research things, generate things, honestly, but it has its downsides. And we have to be aware of that. And we have to be aware that everything we do, our adversaries are also doing, and they don't have restrictions, unlike us.
That's the question, like that's the big one that I'm really curious about. Like, how is your field going to be changing as a result of that? I suppose you're trying to answer it there, but that's a tough one. That's $1 million question, I suppose, right? Like, that's a hard one.
I think that the hardest thing that our industry and humanity as a whole is going to experience in the next few years is the ability to differentiate between available data and factual data. AI and deepfake are making it almost impossible to differentiate. For example, for someone like you, for someone like me, that we have our voice, our characters are out there. Just Google me, you'll find 1 million podcast episodes. Take a sample of my voice, record it, generate it. You can call my dad and he'll be convinced that he's talking to me. So this is again going back to education. Educating our kids, educating our colleagues, our friends, our families, our parents. Ask a question. Ask a very personal question that no one else will know. And it can be as simple as, Christopher, who introduced us?
Yeah.
That could be it. Remember that Thai place we went to? Remember where it was? It doesn't have to be something very sophisticated. And change. By the way, if you use a specific question, and I actually did mention it a few times on live podcasts, I had an incident a few months ago that I thought someone was scamming me. I thought someone was impersonating my 11-year-old son. So I asked him, who was your first martial arts teacher? Now, I always mention that because this question is a question that I will never, ever use again. I will ask him a different question that only he will know. But that is something that is not technological. It's super simple if someone thinks about it. Again, if no one ever told you have to look right and left before you cross the road, you wouldn't know.
There it is.
So someone has to tell you this.
Yeah, there it is. It's just a shift of our mindset, really, as we're entering into this digital age, right? Or this AI, evolution, revolution, whatever you'd like to call it. This common knowledge that has to take shape in the masses, basically, for us to be able to sort of cope with it. Yeah, it's an interesting time. It's fascinating. And I completely agree with you. I mean, like we can't run away from it. It's here. It's going to constantly evolve. It just comes down to, like you said, the word educating ourselves, educating others. Yeah. And I guess this kind of returns full circle to why I was interested in speaking with you in the first place here is like for these perspectives, because your space is certainly evolving. It's growing, as we mentioned earlier, and opportunities are going to be there for individuals who are, looking to step into this world. So I can't believe we're approaching an hour here.
We need more people.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I really enjoyed this conversation from start to finish. I can't believe we've already blown through it here. And I can't thank you enough for taking some time and joining the program today, May.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, it sure was. Now, for those interested in learning more about May and her work, you can do so via a bunch of different ways. You can find her at her website. You can find her on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, as well as her book. And for reference, all this information, including links, will be on the website lifeasa.com. And also, if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share. To show further support, you can always rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. And lastly, as I mentioned off the top, head on over to YouTube. I do have highlights from these audio recordings hosted over there. And if you do make it over to YouTube, I would love that like or subscribe. Now, finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.